Greetings. Hello, how is everybody doing tonight? Is that too loud? No? Okay, perfectly loud, reasonably loud? I'll take it. Great. Well, I would first like to welcome everyone here, both on PLU's campus and on our live stream for attending. We really appreciate this awesome turnout. You all deserve a round of applause for showing up. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Dr. Justin Eckstein. I'm the Director of Forensics here at Pacific Lutheran University, and I'm going to be your moderator. Thank you for coming to the third annual Ruth Anderson Debate Series. The Ruth Anderson Debate Series mission is to offer community members a forum to debate issues of public concern. And we feel like for the Pacific Lutheran University community, there's no more pressing issue than the minimum wage, considering that recent data from the U.S. Census indicates 50% of college students are actually paid the minimum wage. Before we begin, I want a couple thank yous. First, I'd like to thank Dean Cameron Bennett in the School of Arts and Communications for supporting the event, Amanda Lee Compt for her support promoting the event, Kate Williams for the design, the poster that you all saw, Sam Altenberger behind me for technological support. I'd also like to thank the TOH Carl Forensics Forum with their help for the event. They're the ones sitting down up here in front, although you all probably can't see them too well. Specifically, I want to call out a couple members from the organizing committee. That's Caitlin Porter, Caitlin Hall, and Tori Vigil for their tireless hours of organizing, coordinating, and promoting the event. So during the debate, we want to hear your voice, so please tweet at us at PLU Debate and use the hashtags hashtag RA15 and 15, hashtag PLU15 now, and hashtag PLU No 15 to add your opinion to the debate. And that also goes for those of you on Twitter. We will be taking questions from Twitter, so please tweet at us. We'll also be projecting stuff up there in a minute. The minimum wage, as we currently understand it, comes from a United States Supreme Court decision in 1937 in the West Coast Hotel Company versus Parrish that happened in Wenatchee, Washington. So we find it only fitting that Washington is in the news again to talk about the minimum wage. First with SeaTac raising it to $15 an hour, then Seattle, and now potentially Tacoma. Tacoma voters have a choice. They have a chance to approve or reject two minimum wage options this November. Citizens Initiative number 1 and City of Tacoma Initiative number 1B. If voters approve Initiative 1, employers will immediately be required to pay wages of $15 an hour starting January 1st. If they choose the city's initiative, Initiative 1B, it would raise the minimum wage to $10.35 in February for those 16 and older with annual increases through 2018. For us, this raises some interesting questions. Is the wage the best instrument to alleviate poverty? Is 15 too much? Too small? And what is the proper timeline? To answer these questions, we have four supremely qualified debaters. First, those speaking in favor of the resolution, those in favor of raising the wage to $15 an hour, we have Vince Kueter. He's a strategic research analyst for SEIU Healthcare 1199 Northwest, a union that represents hospital workers. He holds 2 master's degrees and is a researcher for organizations like the Seattle Times, Gordon Thomas Honeywell, and the, what? I'm sorry, and the Washington Department of Labor and Industry. Important tense change. Also arguing in favor of the resolution is Angie Tinker. She's a senior majoring in history and Chinese studies. Angie has a storied debate career, including winning last year's public debate. That's right, she's our defending champion. And is an accomplished scholar, recently winning top student paper in the 2014 Western States Communication Association. Speaking in opposition to the resolution, those against raising the minimum wage, first we have Tom Pierson. He's the president and CEO of the Tacoma Pierce County Chamber. He's held such position since June 2011. Since landing at the Tacoma Pierce County Chamber, Tom has rebranded and redefined the chamber and helped it solidify its standing as the voice for business throughout the community. Sitting next to Tom is Matt Aust, a junior majoring in communication and Hispanic studies. He has debated in Vermont, Alaska, the national tournament, and most recently won the TOH Carl Most Improved Speaker Award for the 2014-2015 season. Ladies and gentlemen, your debaters. The debate will proceed in 3 rounds. In the first round, each debater will give a 7-minute opening statement. In the second round, debaters will take questions from me, the audience, and Twitter. And then finally, each debater will give a 3-minute final statement. This round will be adjudicated or decided using the Woodward shift of opinion ballot. The winner will be the side that has the most votes migrate to them. What does that mean? It means it's not the number of votes you get, but the number of minds you change. And we determine that by having you vote at the very beginning and at the very end. So whatever side has the most votes moved to their side wins the debate. So before we begin, we ask everyone to please vote. Now, one thing you might notice is your program has the wrong number. That's half the fun of dealing in a digital age in which that changes faster than those are printed. So we apologize. The number you should text is right behind me. So please vote. Yes. I'm sorry. That's the only instrument we have. I can send one of my debaters for you if you'd like. Who would like to be her proxy vote? All right, we got you, Barbara. Can you head over there? We got you. All right, we need one more proxy voter. Noah. What is it? Yep. For what? For you?
Goodness, we should have instructed none of the debaters.
I need 3 more proxy voters. 1, 2, 3. Good thing I have a lot of debaters. We need 1 more proxy voter. We got you, Barbara. We got her. Yeah. Barbara's your proxy voter.
She got somebody else.
Oh, okay. I got you. We need 1 more. Okay, I need 1 more proxy voter, please.
Sounds like they're stacking the numbers.
All right, Riley, will you proxy vote for him? Oh no, you have a phone. You can vote yourself. If you're a proxy voter, please sit by the person you're proxy voting for. All right, let's see what it is at the beginning. All right, we got a lot of undecided voters. That's good. That's the power of debate. All right, so without much further ado, I yield the floor to Vince. Thank you, sir.
By the way, I wish I had Justin's marketing ability. I must have. So what's life like when you earn the minimum wage? Well, you're 3 times more likely to be homeless even if you're working full time. If you're a low-income worker, if you do have a home, that home is much more likely to be in foreclosure. You're more likely to be a victim of violent crime. You're more likely to be a victim of domestic abuse. You're more likely to have high blood, and this causes stress. So you're more likely to have high blood pressure, heart disease, psychiatric illnesses, cancer. If you earn less than $25,000 a year, which by the way is the range in which a $12 an hour minimum wage or a $12 an hour wage falls, you're 2.5 times more likely to have diabetes. If you live in area code 98405, your life expectancy is 17 years shorter than if you live in area code 98323. Area code 98405 is the Hilltop neighborhood in Tacoma, and 98323 is the town of Carbonado. Why a $15 minimum wage? because it's a long overdue correction. It's a $9.47 wage is an antiquated wage which hasn't kept up with a modern economy, and people have fallen behind. They can't, to put this in context, $9.47 an hour translates for a full-time job working 40 hours a week, 280 hours a year at $19,000 a year, $24,000 a year at $12 an hour. That's not enough to support a typical family, not even half as much to support a typical family of three where both parents need to earn at least around $30,000 a year just to meet basic expenses. It's not enough to be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Tacoma. So there's a crisis. The question is, what impact would, if we need to solve this crisis, what would be the impact on the local economy? Well, the preponderance of studies show that there's minimal or no impact on unemployment. It doesn't drive businesses out of town. It doesn't cause businesses to close. And in most industries, the minimum wage is not the reason that prices increase. In the restaurant industry, it does, but it's a very minimal increase. If it's about 0.7% for every 10% that the minimum wage increases. If you think about that as a $4 Big Mac, it adds about 16 cents to that Big Mac. So 16 cents to improve the lives of people. There are a preponderance of studies which support these conclusions. The few studies that don't have been widely discredited. There was a Congressional Budget Office study that since 600 economists said was not credible. And then a study by Clemens and Withers where the methodology was a little more credible, but they cherry-picked the participants to find the most vulnerable vulnerable people who were subject to layoffs anyway, not necessarily related to the minimum wage, and they didn't show a causal relationship between the minimum wage and job loss. So basically, what you come down to is that we have a crisis now. $15 an hour is right about what's needed. It's not a figure that's picked out of the air. It's about the amount that's needed to help people meet that crisis, to help people keep their heads above water. Any option below $15 an hour keeps people behind. It keeps expenses above income. And the minimum wage was always intended to be the minimum that you need for subsistence. It was never intended to be a training wage. It was never intended to be a starter wage. That's what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said when he instituted the minimum wage. And so we have this crisis, and we have a minimal economic impact, which means that the best course of action is to move toward solving the crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince, for your comments. I would like to now yield the floor to Matt. And sorry, the timer buzzes for some reason at 5 minutes. We just all learned this together.
Well, hello. As a college student with a minimum wage job, I'm in an awkward position. $15 sounds nice, but not at the cost of future employment. That is why I am proud to stand in opposition to Initiative 1, because it will take jobs away from the people who need them most. Initiative 1 does not help workers, it hurts our community, and it doesn't alleviate poverty. Today I will demonstrate to you, step by step, how the extreme hike that Initiative 1 mandates will lead to fewer employment opportunities in Tacoma. Then, Tom will tell you how this measure will affect the cost of living in Tacoma. You might think that the minimum wage is $9.47, but really, it's $0. That's the wage of the unemployed. And that is the wage that Initiative 1 is going to force more people into working. They want you to believe that jobs are not going to be lost by raising the minimum wage. But the problem with this logic is that it runs counter to the most basic laws of economics. These are, of course, the laws of supply and demand. When the cost of a good rises, demand goes down. Labor is a good, just like anything, and as the price of it goes up, businesses will find ways to use less of it. What does this mean for Tacoma's businesses? It doesn't mean that businesses like Walmart and McDonald's are going to close down and move away. They have the financial means to survive this massive shock. It will be the small locally owned businesses like Forelli's Pizza, Frugal's Burgers, and even PLU's own favorite watering hole, the Haven Pub, that will be hurt. Small locally owned businesses are the real job creators in Tacoma. If Initiative 1 passes, there will be fewer jobs in 2017 than there would be if it hadn't passed. We know this because of a case study that's especially useful when thinking about Tacoma's minimum wage. In 1998, Washington voters passed Initiative 688, which raised the minimum wage by 20% over 2 years and tied future increases to inflation. Keep in mind the vast disparity between a 20% increase over 2 years and the 58% overnight increase demanded by our Tacoma initiative. The I-688 case study is the best example for this debate because it happened right here in Washington. It's much more reasonable to compare Tacoma's economy to the larger estate economy than to try to compare Tacoma to, say, New Jersey, like some economic studies have done. This is especially true since Tacoma, as Washington's third largest city, actually makes up a sizable chunk of the state's economy. In order to assess the damage a drop in minimum wage jobs would have, we have to first look at who stands to gain the most from a minimum wage job: the low-skilled worker. Low-skilled workers include both high school students starting out and those without any specialized education who rely on a minimum wage job to make ends meet. Before 1998, when voters raised the minimum wage by 20%, Washington's teen unemployment rate generally tracked with the national average. But immediately after the minimum wage was increased, our teen unemployment rate rose above the national average, and it hasn't been below the national average since. In fact, in 2010, at the height of the Great Recession, Washington's teen unemployment rate was 8.5% higher than the national average. This means that not only did I-688 hurt the teen employment prospects, but it made Washington's job market even weaker in the face of an economic downturn. For the teenagers just starting out, $15 minimum wage will be devastating. Teens are in an especially tough spot since a minimum wage job isn't just a way to get extra spending money, it's a pathway to future employment by building a strong work history. This is especially important for teens who don't have the ability to go to college. For these students, a blue-collar apprenticeship can be a ladder of opportunity. However, nobody's going to offer an apprenticeship to a candidate who doesn't already have a strong work history, even if that work history is just washing dishes. But teens aren't the only ones who will lose out, and unfortunately, they won't even be the hardest hit. That burden falls on low-wage workers in the accommodation and food service industries. 15 Now wants you to think about college grads saddled with student loans. I want you to think about how much more difficult it will be to pay back student loans if you can't find any job. I might not dream of a minimum wage job post-graduation, but I would rather know that some employment is out there for me than nothing. Again, we can look to government labor statistics to back this up. Before '98, Washington held a proportional share of the country's hospitality jobs. After the big wage hike, Washington's hospitality jobs stagnated despite strong job growth in the economy as a whole. It's important to look at mostly low-wage sectors like hospitality when evaluating the effects of a minimum wage hike, because trends in the larger economy will swamp the smaller trends specific to low-wage labor. A minimum wage pay raise has to come from somewhere. Businesses could choose to raise prices, they could cut back their workers' hours, or they could cut back into their own profits. That last one sounds good, doesn't it? Greedy bosses and shareholders get less, honest working folks get more? Well, not quite. This assumes that profits go straight into the pockets of individuals and not into expanding the company. When profits go down, businesses don't expand because they simply don't have extra money. Not expanding, that means not opening new stores, not servicing new areas, means fewer jobs in the long run. And while all of this happening, 15 Now won't even make a dent in poverty. In 1998, advocates claimed that I-688 would enable full-time workers to rise out of poverty. In reality, though, Washington's poverty rate changed little in the wake of the last wage hike. The only time Washington's poverty rate has been higher than the national average was in 2003, and that was at the peak of a 4-year straight increase in the poverty rate, starting right after I-688 took effect. Virtually no change, despite a sharp increase, was seen in the poverty rate when you compare the time before and the time after I-688. At this point, if I haven't convinced you that raising the minimum wage will hurt jobs, I have at least shown you empirically that raising the wage has almost no effect on poverty. By voting for $15, you risk losing jobs, but you get no anti-poverty benefits. Clearly, our own history, Washington's history, shows us that minimum wage hikes are an ineffective anti-poverty program at best and a dangerous experiment at worst. In 1998, advocates of I-688 claimed that the measure would depoliticize the minimum wage and put the issue to rest forever by tying the wage to inflation. Clearly, they were wrong. If I-688 with a 2-year phase-in had long and lasting and significant negative impacts, imagine how much more is at stake with a drastic 58% hike overnight. Despite a growing population and a relatively vibrant economy, I-688 failed to create entry-level jobs at the same rate as other sectors of our state's economy. I've told you how the destruction of these jobs hurts teenagers, college grads, and anybody in the serious need of a job. Vote for history, not pipe dreams. Say no to 15 Now.
I'd like to thank Matt for its comments. Just to briefly summarize what we've heard so far, Vince has told us that the minimum wage right now is not proportional to what families in Tacoma needs. He told us that people who are making not enough money, that they're suffering, that they're more likely to have adverse health effects and they can't even afford rent, and that a raise in the wage is needed to set the way to make it more proportional to the quality of life. From Matt, we just heard that raising the wage will cost us jobs, and empirically it has not solved poverty. He gave us the case study of 688, which happened in 1998. I know that's a lot of eights, and where the minimum wage was raised by 20%. I now yield the floor to Angie.
If you want to know what's best for Tacoma, you can't stop studying. It's not enough to know a few numbers and have taken Econ 101. It's not enough simply to know that 17% of Tacoma citizens live in poverty. That's about 1 in 5 people, or 2 for every row that you're sitting in. If you really want to know what's best for Tacoma, you have to know the citizens. Each statistic has a story. I'm going to tell you 3 of those stories and show how a $15 minimum wage can transform their lives. Their names have been changed to preserve anonymity. Our first we'll call Brenda. She's a student here at PLU who can't afford her diploma. Brenda represents a sizable population. Between PLU, UPS, UW Tacoma, TCC, and all the various smaller technical colleges and trade schools, Tacoma has about 15,000 college students. There are an additional 28,000 in the Tacoma School District who deserve to feel confident enough to go to college and not worry about low wages. Brenda's troubles started early. Most of her scholarships didn't renew after her first semester, and tuition increased. The government didn't help her with this mismatch because her financial aid didn't take into account the cost of her stepfather's disability. PLU overflowed her inbox, telling her she needed to pay up or she would be forced out of all of her classes. The stress built. As she studied late at night, she was so anxious about the money that she couldn't remember anything she had read. She was too depressed to get out of bed so she could attend class or see her friends. She was forced to take out a lot of loans. Brenda is a senior now, and all this time there has only been 1 month where she hasn't been working. She's worked catering all through the evening until midnight and then the next day at 5 a.m., skipping out on meals. She's worked recycling, hauling dead animal carcasses from dumpsters and wearing a gas mask to keep from gagging while cleaning up food compost that had melted into a soup in the sun. She's worked event staff, cleaning up bodily fluids in dorm rooms for up to 72 hours a week while getting sick from the harsh chemicals. She's about to graduate, but PLU still wants more money, or they'll withhold her diploma. With a $15 minimum wage, she would have enough to get that diploma and validate her struggles. It's not just students, though. This next story is about Alyssa, and she can't afford to work just one job. She's one of many Tacoma workers with college degrees and jobs. In short, workers who have done everything yet right and yet still struggle. Oftentimes, the only positions hiring are in retail, cleaning, and food service, and so people like Alyssa are forced to take low-paying positions. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, those account for 1 in 4 jobs in Tacoma, and too often, these people have to work multiple jobs. Alyssa works over 40 hours a week at 2 jobs. She works retail, where workers are responsible for knowing every item in their section, scrape and clean the biohazards that are public bathrooms, and dealing with customers trying to hide stolen lipstick in their underwear. She also works food service, where workers deal with the constant threat of cooking burns and knife cuts. She works hard as a server, putting bread on the tables of her customers, but she struggles to put bread on her own table. She graduated college with student loan debt, only to find that having a degree wouldn't guarantee her a good job. In her retail position, she's been working for over 6 years, and yet she's only received a 22-cent raise in that whole time. It's not an issue of qualifications. She's a proud, educated, hardworking citizen. With a $15 minimum wage, she would have enough to focus on finding the opportunity she needs to be at her full potential, rather than just surviving. But even highly skilled positions that match people's degrees are strenuous. Our next story is about Becky, and she can't afford to be healthy. It's particularly ironic because Becky is a certified nurse's assistant who works overtime whenever she can, sometimes up to 24 hours in a day, to save lives. She sacrifices sleep and is forced to eat cheap and fast. Nurses' assistants deal with delusional and violent patients. They console grieving family members. They clean up way too many different types of spills, and they soothe patients who are too racked with pain to think straight. The toll is harsh on her own health, because health is a luxury. The long-term stress of low wages weakens her immune system at the same time that she's surrounded by disease. This is made worse because she can't afford the time it would take away from work to sleep well or to cook a nutritious, healthy meal. According to researchers at the University of Georgia, this is why working class people are at a greater risk of mental disorders, diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. With a $15 minimum wage, Becky would have enough to stop working overtime and look after her own health along with the health of her patients. The city of Tacoma is not lazy. Tacoma workers are not underskilled, only underpaid. Yet, even despite their low wages, they don't shirk because they're proud, they're dignified, and they're committed. We have a duty as a city to recognize the dignity of labor and pay them a fair price for their work. A $15 minimum wage is a tool of empowerment. It recognizes the dignity of Tacoma workers. Workers who put in their time and make enough to support themselves no longer have to be dependent for help because they empower and help themselves. People won't have to be reliant for welfare payments based on the whims of distant, impersonal bureaucrats in DC. Instead, they'll have a dignified chance to be independent. That's what a $15 minimum wage allows. So, we demand to live in a Tacoma that gives everyone a fair shot. We demand a Tacoma that lets Brenda afford her diploma, a Tacoma that lets Alyssa work to her full potential, a Tacoma that lets Brittany look after her own health. We demand a $15 minimum wage.
Thank you, Angie, for a point. Now yield the floor to Tom to close out the first round.
Well, thank you. So at this point, we're at 21 minutes of this conversation, and we really haven't heard what the heck's going on out there. It's been 21 minutes of conjecture about what may or may not be happening based on some best intentioned studies. And you'll hear from me more about some studies as well. But let's first take a reality check. First, we need to step back and look at the environment that we are operating in and the issue that we're looking at. So please bear with me while I take a moment to set the stage. In December 2014, a group of maybe 10 activists decided on their own that Tacoma needed their very own citywide minimum wage and filed a petition with the city, began to gather signatures. However, rather than raising the minimum wage over a several-year phase-in, as other cities have done, to raise it to 15, Seattle as a phase-in. San Francisco is doing this in a phase-in. LA is doing this in a phase-in. But these 10 people felt raising the minimum wage by 58% overnight was the right answer. Let me pause there for a second. 58% overnight. For many organizations, paying employees is their largest cost. Imagine what that large cost might be for you. Is it your rent? Is it your mortgage, your tuition? How would you cope with that? What expenses could you cut? Could you cut those expenses? Would you have to move? Would you have to go to a new school, new home? These are those questions that small businesses and nonprofits throughout Tacoma are asking themselves and trying to figure out if this passes. How are they going to cope? Now, the same group of small people who didn't want the phase-in like other cities also felt that the state law simply did not have enough in terms of the general labor regulations. So rather than changing the state law, instead of trying to rewrite, they rather rewrite Tacoma's labor laws. And they hid in their proposals changes such as the statutes of limitations, altering enforcement mechanisms, creating new enforcement and police powers, and giving that to the authority of the city of Tacoma. Virtually everyone who has examined the minimum wage issue agrees that city by city minimum wage are not the right way to go. And that's because of one, it creates a bizarre competitive landscape between cities. Two, cities take on this enforcement role outside of the state. And three, businesses operate between multiple cities. They have to navigate between these different jurisdictions and the unique labor laws that are presented there. But however, when the democratically led State House of Representatives passed a statewide increase in the minimum wage in 2015, that would raise the minimum wage in the state to $12 over a 4-year period to 2019. This local group of activists was nowhere to be seen. They weren't there working to raise the minimum wage, yet they believe that a legislative process be damned. So you fast forward a few months, the mayor, city council of Tacoma unanimously passed a task force to dedicate to find an alternate way to raise the minimum wage, a way that could be collaboratively agreement between all people in Tacoma, small business, elderly, unions, employees, residents throughout the city, come together and find a broad-based, consensus amongst people of what would be best for Tacoma. And after reviewing this, an alternative 15 was put on the ballot. That alternative is a $12 phased in over 2 years, yet still faster than what the state had done. This $12 gives low wage paid workers $5,000 per year extra. So to that worker that's making $20,000, that's a huge increase, $5,000. And it avoids the pitfalls associated with the policies that were put together by the 15 Now group. The proponents of a 58% increase to the minimum wage will tell you that they went out and gathered 3,200 signatures. It took them over 6 months to do this in a city of over 200,000 people. So that's less than 1.5% of the population. The public responded when this collaborative approach went together, and it came before the council. Overwhelmingly people supported, came to these hearings, supported $12 over a phased in. Phased in allows businesses, small businesses, time to adjust so they can expand, as Matt talked about. And it also gives employees this great benefit as well. So today we're not talking about Should we raise the minimum wage? Absolutely not. We're not saying that. We're saying we need to raise it, but we need to, in a compromise approach. 15 now is a few people who think this needs to go in overnight, shouldn't be that quick. We need to go quicker, or we need to go in a phased in that's a approach between the two. So, so that's just kind of the background of where we're at, and why we're here tonight. We talked about the cost of living. A lot of people talk about the cost of living. Cities phase this in, $15. San Francisco, LA, we talked about that, $15 over a phase in. When this goes into effect 2016, if it was passed, City of Seattle would be at 11, where Tacoma is 15. You tell me what the cost of living is like in Tacoma versus Seattle. It's a huge difference. All of these higher costs of living in Tacoma is a great deal difference in Tacoma than Seattle, than San Francisco, than LA. So let's take a look at Seattle. When they reach $15 an hour, it's 2021, 5 years later than Tacoma, if you say yes. Tacoma's cost of living is 58% of Seattle's, yet if it's past the minimum wage, we will be 36% higher than theirs. If our minimum wage was 83% of Seattle's 15, then it would put us a little bit over $12 an hour. We also talked a little bit earlier today about jumping these overnight small business stories. We talked about some, icky jobs. But small business need to reevaluate their decisions. Small business, like Debbie, that's in our flyer, she has to raise it's cost her 27% spike in her payroll. And this is similar to small businesses throughout the city. Small business is not the evil. They do right by their employees, but they need to stay open. They need to be able to attract and to be able to expand. No to 15 now. Thank you.
Thank Tom for his comments. Just to review what we've heard so far, Angie got up here and she told you about the lives of minimum wage workers and the different struggles and experiences that they go through. She really contextualized the numbers that Vince brought you. On the other side, Tom made arguments that questioned the enforcement mechanism, that is, whether it should be immediate or we should do it over time, and whether or not the state actor is really the best agent to enforce the plan or enforce a minimum wage increase, or whether or not it should be done on a state level or allow the market to set it. I'm noticing a couple points of commonality as we move into the second round of this debate, which is question and answer. The first that I found really interesting is there's a debate about quantity of jobs versus quality of jobs. On the one hand, Matt is telling you that there would be an overall net decrease of jobs if we were to adopt 15 now, but on the other side, Angie and Vince are telling you that these jobs that we do have would be worth more. So I want to throw this question to Angie, and I want to know, Angie, and you have a minute to respond, and this round is about 20 minutes. Angie, could you please tell me why having less jobs that pay more would be good, or you're free to challenge the premise.
So we've already shown you why there will barely be any job loss whatsoever. It's not about the numbers, though. It's about the motivations. People like Alyssa won't have to work 2, 3, 4 jobs anymore. People like Becky won't be so strapped for cash they'll constantly be taking overtime. This means that people will be working less. That's true. But it actually opens up space for other people as needed. And when they work less, they'll actually be working better. Workers will have less dread and stress about working and money. They'll be able to take better care of themselves. Therefore, they'll be more energized and productive.
Excellent. So I'm going to throw this question to you then, Matt. Angie tells us that these workers will actually be better and more productive, yielding potentially more value.
Yeah, well, I'd like to challenge the premise of that. Like I said before, this is all predicated on the fact that workers are going to be able to get a job. The ability, the increase in quality of life is all predicated on the ability to get a job. And as I told you in my case study, that simply hasn't played out in the past. Furthermore, I don't think that the workers are going to be more productive, because if you look at the productivity increases that we've seen in our economy over the past 20, 30 years, all of them have come from computer-aided technology. That means that attorneys are faster at finding law precedents when they look up stuff on the internet. Students can do research faster. That's where our economy's productivity gains have come from. At the end of the day, flipping burgers has not changed much in 30 years. And so I don't see any incentive for a worker to be more productive working at $15 an hour, especially when that's the floor wage across the entire economy. There's nothing special about that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Matt's making two arguments here. The first argument he's making is a mechanization argument, which says that if we raise the wage, it will become cheaper for us to just build technology to replace jobs. I think it's something like when you go to the grocery store and you see the checkout where there's 4 checkouts, you can do it yourself versus having a checker there. And then the second argument you're making, can you reiterate it again?
Yeah, so the second argument is that the minimum wage is not kept pace with productivity, but when we're looking at the productivity of workers in our economy, these productivity gains have come not from the low-wage jobs, but at things like when you look at the technology sector, when you look at scholarly professions like the legal profession, that's where these productivity gains come from using computers to do your job better, which has virtually no effect on a lot of this low-wage labor.
Vince, do you care to respond to this?
Well, actually, most of the studies that have been done on the relationship between productivity and wages have shown an exponential increase in productivity across all sectors, not just high-tech sectors or high-end employment. And over a 30-year period, it's been an enormous gap, and the gap has actually grown to almost where the when you account for inflation, wages have been essentially flat, while the slope of productivity has been something on the order of like a 35% slope. It's a big disconnect.
So if we're hearing Vince right, it's saying statistically that this doesn't play out, that in fact you do see an increase in productivity when you have an increased wage. So I do have a follow-up question then. I'm going to return to Matt for a moment. And one of the arguments that you made I thought was interesting, where you said that there would be less jobs available, but I do wonder if you're taking an approach to economics based on manufacturing. How does your analysis weigh in an economy that's primarily driven by consumerism and consumption?
Sure. So the case study that I looked at, I-688, this was not a speculative study done by an economist sitting at his desk. What we're looking at here with my study is the numbers of what actually happened in Washington. So these are service jobs, accommodation and food service. Before the wage was raised, these tracked along with our population growth, along with all the other jobs in the economy for Washington State. After the wage was raised, these jobs flatlined while the economy and the population continued to grow. What does that mean? That means that unless the only people coming to Washington are very highly skilled and getting high-wage jobs, that some of these people are getting left in the dust because there's not sufficient job growth on the lower end of the wage spectrum.
Thank you. Vince, Tom brought up an interesting point that I'd like you to address. Why 15 now?
We need 15 now precisely because people need 15 now, because low-wage workers are behind on the rent now. Low-wage workers are experiencing crushing medical debt right now, because low-wage workers are essentially dying because their incomes are so low. And the point really isn't how much it costs to live in Seattle. The point is, how much does it cost to live in Tacoma? The minimum wage in Tacoma should be matched to what is the minimum level of subsistence needed to get by in Tacoma. $15 an hour is the right wage for Tacoma. A comparison with Seattle is a distraction. Let Seattle decide what its solution is going to be. Tacoma needs to decide what its solution needs to be.
Thank you for that. Tom, I want to give you an opportunity to respond. Why is 15 a legitimate number, and why does it have to be, why shouldn't it be right now if we can save lives?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have to go back to, if 15 overnight is the answer, why didn't Seattle do it? Why didn't San Francisco do it? Why didn't LA do it? Recently, Huffington Post reported on 10 cities with the highest minimum wages once adjusted to inflation. And you know who made that list? Tacoma. Tacoma already has the 10th highest minimum wage in the country once adjusted to inflation. The idea that we'd want to raise and increase it by 58% overnight seems a little absurd, don't you think?
Well, I want to follow up with you on a secondary question, Tom, that you raised where you talked about how small businesses are going to be harmed by the wage. And I wonder if you can unpack this a little bit more. Why wouldn't the 27% increase you described, increase in payroll, just come out to an increase of 16 cents on something like a burger?
Yeah, I don't know where the 16 cents comes from. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. If you have a 58% in your biggest expense, it will take a pizza place. Biggest expense is your labor. And a 58% on the labor. So in the story that's in the pamphlet that we handed out, clearly not everybody's making the minimum wage. But at 15, she has to increase those. And so it's a 27% increase. Where does that 27% come from? Most businesses have gone through the Great Recession. We've cut expenses. They're not driving fancy cars. They're barely keeping the doors open. That 27% increase goes directly to the customer.
One of the arguments that Tom just made, I want to turn over to Angie, where Tom is making the argument, sort of reiterating Matt's point, that the money that businesses make is reinvested to expand the business as well, to also offer more jobs. How would you take a world in which now there are less jobs that pay people nothing? How would they handle medical expenses?
So we actually believe, first of all, that small businesses will benefit in two major ways. First, from the demand side, as people have more money to spend with businesses and new customers will come in to buy goods that they couldn't afford earlier. This is the mom who can afford to buy her toddler new clothes rather than just giving them hand-me-downs. The second is from the supply side, as workers are able to be more productive and efficient, as I was discussing earlier. So, because the workers will be able to work more efficiently, more productively, and because customers will have an increase in consumption ability, we think that businesses will actually flourish, especially given the small business exemption, which already exists in Initiative 1.
All right. Matt, Angie just told us there's a small business exemption, and in fact that they would do better under Initiative 1. Do you care to respond?
Yeah, I would. 15 Now has been citing a number that says that about 50% of the businesses in Tacoma are going to be exempted under this small business. Their definition of small business is less than $300,000 gross income. Gross income is every dollar that goes into a business's till. So $300,000 is an incredibly low number. Just a small teriyaki shop with maybe, 15 seats in it is going to go over that in about 2 months. When they talk about 50% of businesses that they exempt, a lot of what they're looking at is actually business license holders. They're not what we would call businesses. They're hairstylists, real estate agents, and a lot of other people like that for tax reasons, the city forces to have a business license.
Can you elaborate why that's significant?
Yeah, because all of these people that they're claiming are exempted, all of these small businesses, in quotes, that they're claiming to exempt, they're not employers, right? So what we look at is the businesses that are actually going to be affected, the businesses that we really think of as small businesses, they're going to be hit with this. They claim that there's a comparative advantage between, small businesses won't have to pay it, large businesses will, so it's going to be cheaper to shop at a small business. But that's really not going to come out in the wash.
I'm going to give Vince the opportunity to respond.
The fact is that small businesses are neither the problem, aren't the problem here. and the small businesses aren't really the ones that are under threat. The majority, just to kind of back in the statistics a little bit. So Tacoma has a workforce of about 100,000. There's, if you kind of normalize that to FTE, that's about 80,000.
Please tell what FTE is to the group.
For full-time equivalent jobs, as if everyone was working full-time, so you can have a fair, comparison. Of those, about 2,000, a little over 2,000 of those FTE are actually minimum wage jobs. The majority of the and if you look at jobs that are under $15 an hour, that's about that's about maybe a quarter of that FTE workforce. What you find is that the majority of employers are actually large businesses and large employers. So the mean hourly wage in Tacoma is actually about $22 an hour. It's what 15 now is singling out are large employers who are exploiting a low wage workforce. And so we're talking about a specific segment that's not going to disproportionately affect small businesses, but in fact is actually going to actually greatly increase the quality of life for low-wage workers at a minimal impact to the economy at large.
Thank you. That is time for that, and we're going to take questions.
Can I take 10 seconds on that?
I'm sorry, we're out of time. It will come back up, I promise. All right, where is Tori with the mic? All right, so Tori, we are now, do you have the mic in hand? Where's the mic? The mic is up there. All right, so Tori is going to be circulating with the mic if you have a question. Raise your hand. I think we're going to start with Professor Monaco, and then...
Thanks, Justin.
And I'd just like to remind the participants they have a 1-minute response window. 1 minute.
Is it on?
Yep.
Okay. Great. So my question is for Tom. Data suggests that both at a national level and at the state level that the economy is recovering from the Great Recession. GDP is coming back. We're adding jobs. Unemployment rate is down. However, real wages continue to stagnate. They're kind of missing from the recovery. Wouldn't an increase in the minimum wage, one, ensure that the gains from this recovery are shared more evenly throughout all contributors to the economy, and two, put more money in the pockets of Tacoma workers who frequent these Tacoma businesses?
So first of all, we do a Pierce County Economic Index. Actually, a couple professors here at PLU. We're honored to have them put that together, and it showed the income or the economy in Pierce County grew last year at 1.65%. I think that's the number. 1.62 might be a little less. All right. So the fact is, Tacoma's economy is different than Seattle's economy, different than Bellevue's economy, and we've come out of this economy. It's 6 years after the Great Recession, and I think your economics, what happens after 6 years after we come out of a recession like this, we might be tipping back down into one. So as well as things are moving, I'm not sure things are moving that fast down here in Tacoma and Pierce County. We're talking about minimum wage, and so minimum wage, how that affects moving up. I think we got to just stick to talk about what the minimum wage looks like and what that means. I think we need to be careful to protect jobs, and that's why we believe increasing the minimum wage is good, but it needs to be done in a way that protects businesses as well as protects workers. And I think the $12 compromise that came together makes that call to action.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello. I haven't written that report. I, to a degree, agree with that number. But my question is about something else, and I have a question for Vince. So I think the disparity that I see between the parties here is about the question, does a minimum wage create an employment effect or not? And the two sides are saying, one side says it is, and the other side says it isn't. And as far as I understand, the empirics on this are actually fairly mixed. Now, your motivation behind this entire campaign is to say, well, we're concerned about poverty. And the question I have for you, why then the minimum wage? Why not advocate for different tool, like, say, for instance, redistribution out of general taxation, something like, I don't know, better welfare, better schools, these sort of things? Why this particular tool if it's a tool that is at least in principle discussed on the question of its effectiveness of reducing poverty?
Who is that addressed to? Time starting.
Well, we've never said that an increase in the minimum wage is something that should happen in isolation, and that there shouldn't be any number of things that should be done to alleviate poverty. But the fact of the matter is, for an individual worker, an increase in income has a demonstrated effect on the quality of life for that individual worker. It is it's absurd to suggest otherwise.
Excellent. Next question.
Yes, I have a question for the opposition, or for the proposal. That my wife actually worked in retail for a number of years, and she, over that time, became a store manager at a prominent retail store. And over that time, she got her wage up to about $15 an hour as a store designer. And my question is then, if you raise everyone's wage to $15 an hour, what happens to, how do you kind of promote those people? And essentially the wage cost, I think, is significantly higher than the 27%. Because it's not just a wage of getting to 15, it's actually bumping everybody from there upward as well. And so I think that I'd like you to address the idea of passing on these costs to customers and why that won't happen.
I think I heard 3 questions in there.
Sorry?
So I'm hearing, let's pick the first one, which is that when you raise the minimum wage to $15, what happens to the people who are already making $15 an hour?
As they become managers, they need to be paid more for the fact they're doing more work.
Okay. Whichever one of you all wants to take it.
I'll take it.
All right. 1 minute.
So there's no law written in stone that the distance between jobs needs to be maintained at a certain level, so that what one person might call wage compression, another person might call reducing income inequality. The fact is that over time you do see that a rising tide does lift all boats. There are market adjustments that that are made. But what this campaign is really about is catching up the floor. It's really the floor that's fallen behind. And it's not necessarily the case that that we're just kind of shifting the whole wage scale up. There isn't just an imaginary wage scale between jobs that's kind of written in the sky. Competition for higher wage jobs will sort that out.
That's time. Next question.
Thank you, and this is for the no people. Are you opposed to any minimum wage regulation at all? And if you are, or even if you're not, why should, given that something like 65% of welfare benefits paid in this country go to people who are working full-time, why should the welfare system subsidize a capital cost of paying for labor power, which should be borne by the business? Thank you.
Well, I think I stated earlier, we are not opposed to raising the minimum wage. We're actually advocating for a something that's been brought together by a group of people, by consensus, what's best for Tacoma. $12 over 2 years is fairly aggressive, and that's what we're advocating for. We think that's an appropriate approach. That's an approach that works for Tacoma. That's an approach that doesn't shock the system. 15 now is a shock to the system. We need something that works for everybody. Keeps jobs, keeps Tacoma growing, expands businesses, expands jobs, and helps people.
I think what was the other side of your question?
Why should the welfare system
Subsidize the market.
the cost of doing business for these businesses? Why should 65% of the welfare go to working people that are working full-time when they should be paying a living wage for the labor that they
Sure, I'd be happy to take that question. Okay, so we live in a modern Western democracy, and because of that, we think that poverty is a bad thing that we shouldn't have in our society. One of the ways that we deal with this is with social welfare programs. Now, I would say that the reason that some of this cost might be better borne by the government, right, which again, and the government is financed by people, financed by businesses, right, so indirectly the costs are coming from there, is because when you look at the smaller end, somebody trying to start a small business, a ladder of economic opportunity from being a worker to an owner of a business, what happens is when you raise the wage, when you regulate the wage this high, you prevent people from getting there. So I say that we should be making these gains all across the economy. All taxpayers should be preventing poverty rather than putting it all on business owners, one specific class of the economy.
Thank you. We have a question in the back.
Yeah, I belong to a feminist organization called Radical Women, and I'd like to hear the speakers comment on the civil rights and human rights aspects of the minimum wage. We know that
Which speaker?
Excuse me?
Which speaker?
Anyone that's interested.
Okie
We know that the poorest paid tend to be women, people of color, immigrants, people with disabilities. They get paid less, and youth. They get paid less because the bosses can get away with it because they have less social power. So I think this is an important stage in equalizing people on many levels, and I'd like to hear people's comments on that.
So I'll give each side 1 minute to respond. I think that's an excellent question. Thank you. I'll give each side 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think it's something that should be really discussed further beyond this couple minutes that we have here. One of the things in the $12 over two years, it's for everybody. You know, why would you exempt out? And if raising the minimum wage is what we need to do, and we're both advocating for raising the minimum wage, why would you exempt out anybody? We don't believe that you should be exempting out anybody. We think if we're going to raise $12, we should raise it for everybody and not exempt out anybody. Other side wants to exempt out some people. We don't think we should. We think if it's good for everybody, keep it simple, keep it across the board, and I think that includes everybody.
Would you all like to respond to the question?
Right. So we actually think that there will be ripple effects when we raise the minimum wage. When people are given the tools to lift themselves up, they will do so. Right now is a pivotal moment. SeaTac, Seattle, and now Tacoma. The eyes of the nation are on us. The tide is against us with super PACs and consistent attacks on workers' advocacy groups. However, if we empower the people's choice through Initiative 1, rather than trying to appease them with a slow, gradual change, we enliven democracy. This creates a space for advocacy, for new voices, for people to make sure that everyone is getting a fair opportunity and an equal shot. This takes us to better public dialogue, more engaged citizens, and a society that's committed to doing the right thing by all of its classes of people.
Excellent. Thank Angie for her response. Unfortunately, I'm going to go to one Twitter question because we're running out of time in this round, and I did promise Twitter that I would answer one of their questions. So this one is for Tom, and it says, there's a concern for small business. How will they survive if people don't have money to spend at them?
Well, I mean, that's one of the premises is the more that you raise the minimum wage, more people have more money you'll have in your pocket. There's a Congressional Budget Office, was quoted earlier, study that says, and this was looking at the federal minimum wage, as you move from $8 up, you have to get to $18 before you actually get any additional dollars in your pocket. So as you move up that ladder, you need to start to pay for more things that you weren't paying for at $8. And so moving it even from $9.47 to $12, $9.47 to $15 doesn't give more money in the pocket, doesn't add more money to the economy. It just means that that there's a shift in terms of those, and it doesn't add to more money for retail, more money for our local businesses in Tacoma.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what your argument is that it trades off with other government subsidies, so you don't have a net increase in spending power. So as my economist friend might say, your real wage may increase, but no, never mind. Even if your money's going up, you can't spend more. I'm going to give 15 now the opportunity to respond to this before moving on to the third round.
Yes. In fact, that if you give people the opportunity to have income that is greater than their basic subsistence expenses, you do give people the opportunity to pursue an education. You give people the opportunity to support local businesses, to eat healthy, nutritious food, and the fact of the matter is they have more disposable and discretionary dollars to spend that they wouldn't have otherwise when they're using the majority of that money to actually fall short on what they owe, and even paying a lot of that and paying that money for rent, food, medical expenses, and on debt and the interest on that debt.
That is time. Thank you. Well, that concludes round two. Yeah. Clap. We'll now move on to the third round, where each of the debaters will give you a 3-minute last statement summarizing their case, and we'll use the same order we did to start. So we'll start with you, Vince.
So what you've heard tonight really is a difference, I think, in priorities. And for much of this debate, a lot of the discourse has been around fears around economic impact, most of which, in fact, almost all of which, there's been no empirical evidence that any of these impacts will occur. We've talked about, and it's fair to discuss, what the plight and what the effects might be on some small businesses. And we care about small businesses too. There's been less of a discussion about what the effect will be on workers and what low-wage workers are experiencing now. I do want to address some of the numbers that are being kicked around, including the 58% increase. Remember that I told you that about 2,000 workers actually earn the minimum wage at this point. Not all of them work for one employer, and most of them work for large employers, which means that the majority of employers, and particularly small businesses, pay a range of wages to those employees. Almost no one will be sacrificing a 58% increase in their payroll, and as a matter of fact, anyone who does probably has been underpaying their workers anyway, as far as that goes. What we need to see in this debate is a stronger focus on what a $15 minimum wage increase would mean for people who right now are underwater. And that, I want to go back to what that means in terms of expenses and annual income. Initiative 1B in 2016 will raise someone's annual income from $19,000 a year to $21,000 a year. It's not It's not going to lift anybody out of poverty. It's not going to lift anybody out of debt. It's not going to solve anybody's problems. 15 now is affordable. There's no evidence that shows that it's going to have a severe deleterious effect on the local economy, and it will help people now.
Thank the speaker for his comments. Matt?
Tom and I have shown you how an overnight $15 minimum wage hike stands to hurt the very people our opponents aim to protect. I showed you how, in the wake of the 1998 wage hike, low-skilled workers had a tougher time finding employment because opportunities at that end of the job spectrum stagnated. Job growth in these sectors stagnated besides strong growth in the rest of our state's economy. This meant that low-skilled workers, from high school on up, had a harder time finding a job. In the end, even if some workers were better off after I-688, our state as a whole was not. Washington's poverty rate actually rose slightly in the 15 years following the last wage hike. Raising the wage wasn't a good anti-poverty measure then, and it certainly won't be now. But if you don't find the numbers convincing, let me bring it down to earth. Let me tell you a story about a world with $15 overnight minimum wage and what it looks like for nonprofit organizations. I want to tell you about a charity. Let's call them Good Deeds. Most people in the community know Good Deeds by their storefronts, which take donated secondhand items and resell them. This provides low-income community members with an affordable place to find life's necessities like clothing and housewares, while at the same time saving billions of pounds of useful items from the landfill, which helps our planet. While this is part of Good Deeds' operation, that while it greatly benefits the community, it's not their main focus, or even the place where they have the greatest impact. Good Deeds' main focus is on helping people get to work. They support job seekers by providing them with help preparing a resume, finding on-the-job training, and offering career counseling. These services are especially vital to underprivileged populations, including veterans, people with disabilities, women, and minorities. Let me tell you about the kind of people Good Deeds helps. Good Deeds helps the people who have hit rock bottom and are trying to turn their life around. They help people that nobody else will hire. What employer would hire someone who is only 3 months sober out of a 17-year meth addiction? Most employers won't take that kind of chance, but Good Deeds has faith in these people. They connect them with education and work training that changes these people's lives. They hire these people often at minimum wage. That's how they ensure that their outreach does the most good for the most people. I told you earlier that the money for this wage hike would have to come from somewhere. I told you that the folks in charge could raise prices. Good Deeds could do that, but they don't want to, since part of their goal is to provide a low-price resource for the community. The other option I told you was that leaders could cut into profits. Good Deeds can't do this by definition. They're a nonprofit. Nobody at Good Deeds is trying to get rich. This only leaves them with one option: to cut back the number of people that they hire. This means that fewer vulnerable people will help getting a job. Getting a job puts these people on their own 2 feet and gets them out of poverty, the supposed goal of my opponents. Employment is the best chance people have at ever getting out of poverty, and $15 minimum wage hurts the best chance many people have at getting a job. Raising the minimum wage didn't work in '98, and it won't work now. Vote no on $15 minimum wage.
Thank the speaker for his statement. Angie?
Let me spend a moment talking about the other side of the debate. The opposition have projections about what may happen at some uncertain point in the future. They spent a long time sorting through examples and teasing out data to build up the most dire scenario and made that seem inevitable instead of just one possibility. They tell you that this debate is a matter of deciding which projections about the future to believe. We've told you why their economic projections are irrelevant. We have case studies and statistics that show that Tacoma will become richer. People will have more money to spend on consumption goods. People will have to work less hours to survive and be able to spend time with their families, friends, and communities. People will be more energized and productive when they show up to work. They say that all of this is happening too fast, But tell Brenda that it's happening too fast when she graduates this upcoming spring and won't get her diploma. Tell Alyssa that it's happening too fast when she's been working at the same job for 6 years and only gotten a 22-cent raise. Tell Becky this is happening too fast when she has to work literally 24 hours a day. The city of Tacoma has waited long enough, and the longer we wait, the more we as a city fail to empower all of our hardworking and dedicated workers. But even if you don't believe this, there's a good deed to be had in voting for a $15 minimum wage. Incidentally, all of the nonprofits on the minimum wage task force supported a $15 minimum wage because they knew their clients would be enriched and helped by it. All of their arguments rest on hypotheticals, some possibilities and projections about the future. Our arguments rest on the people who are struggling here and now. There's no percentage risk of the workers suffering from an economic collapse because they're suffering from an economic collapse right now. They're struggling and hurting here and now. Brenda can't get her diploma. She can't focus on bettering herself through her studies because her wages are too low. Alyssa is stuck in low-paying positions despite being overqualified and struggles to afford the basic necessities of life, such as food, rent, clothing, and energy, even as she's graduated college and worked for years. Becky has to imperil her health over the stress of money, all while helping save the lives of patients. The probability of this suffering is 100%, rather than their vague projections. The time frame is now, rather than at some uncertain point in the future. As a result, $15 now is the only option for Tacoma.
All right, Tom, take us home.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you to everybody for being here and being interested and engaged in this. I think it's obviously a very important issue for us as a state as well as the city. There is no state or there's no city that has gone to $15. There's no city today that has gone to $15 starting January 1st, 2016. Some talk about CTAC, thank you. But we're talking about a few hundred people. No city has gone citywide at $15 January 1st, 2016. So why is Tacoma that city? Why is Tacoma the best economy in the nation? Better in Seattle, better in San Francisco, better in LA?
Please respect the speaker's time. Thank you. Please respect the speaker's time. Thank you.
Phased in works. City of Seattle did that. Phased into 2021. Makes sense. It's good for workers, good for businesses. Tacoma came together to look for an answer. And the answer was $12 over 2 years. Good for everybody, not for just large business, some evil businesses out there. Good for all businesses. Small businesses aren't the evil business out there. They want to do what's best for their employees. I've even heard them say, we can live with a higher minimum wage if we can adjust to it. $12 is the compromise. $12 fits Tacoma. We need that adjustment, that time period, so we can make sure that Tacoma continues to grow. We're growing out of this economy, not that quickly, but we are making improvements. And we need to make sure we have businesses there, we have jobs there, and that we have jobs for everybody. We need that time. $15 overnight doesn't work in Seattle, doesn't work in San Francisco, doesn't work in LA. Not sure why it should work in Tacoma. We have a consensus, we have a compromise in front of us. It's raising minimum wage. It's helping people. We need to do that. We need to raise that, and we need to start today. It's a $5,000 increase to those low-paying jobs. For $20,000, that's a huge increase. $5,000 per employee. That's huge. That's what we need to do. We need to help people. We need to raise it, but we need to do it sensibly. Vote no on 15, vote yes on 12, and let's move Tacoma into the future for generations. Thank you.
And that concludes our debate. So, without further ado, remember how the ballot works. It's a change of mind ballot, not total numbers. Sam, if you would put that back up there. Please vote. Proxies, go find the people you voted for before.
Is this the part where we reach across the aisle?
Yes, this is the part where you reach across the aisle.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Good job. Thank you. Likewise.
I'm not a public speaker usually, so.
You got good data. Angie, nice work. Yeah, you did a great job.
Yeah, you were
All right.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Excellent job. Excellent job. Excellent job. You can back over there if you'd like to see it. So while voting is going on, if you happen to be a student here at Pacific Lutheran University, and you happen to be here because some nice professor offered you extra credit for watching civic advocacy, we will have a table outside with a sign-up sheet that we would like you to sign. We ask that you allow other people who are not here to sign up, not signing up for extra credit, to leave first so we don't create a fire hazard. But we will be, in a moment, having people out there for extra credit sign up. We will be announcing in a second if you all want to see who won. All right, we have a verdict. What is the number? Yeah. So according to our poll, no won by winning over 25 votes. The House believes that no, we should not raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Thank you everyone who came out tonight. We really appreciate your support. Have a good evening. Get home safe. Just tell me. We have a wallet. Somebody dropped a wallet. Oh, we got it. We got it. If you're a debater, come up here. We're going to take a giant picture in a second. I'm sorry. It'll be a moment.